The Mahabharata of Krishna-Dwaipayana Vyasa. Translated into English prose from the original Sanskrit text by Pratap Chandra Roy C.I.E. This free ebook has been downloaded from holybooks.com. Vana Parva. Section 160, Yakshayuddha Parva continued. Vaisampayana said, hearing various sounds resounding in the caves of the mountain and not seeing Bhimasena, Kunti's son, Ajatasatri and the twin sons of Madri and Daumya and Krishna and all the Brahmanas and the friends of the Pandavas, were filled with anxiety. Thereupon, entrusting Draupadi to the charge of Ashtashena and equipped in their arms, those valiant and mighty charioteers together began to ascend the summit of the mountain. And having reached the summit, as those repressors of force and mighty bowmen and powerful charioteers they were looking about, saw Bhima and those huge Rakshasas of mighty strength and courage weltering in a state of unconsciousness, having been struck down by Bhima. And holding his make and sword and bow, that mighty armed one looked like Maghavan, after he had slain the Danava hosts. Then on seeing their brother, the Pandavas, who had attained excellent state, embraced him and sat down there. And with those mighty bowmen, that summit looked grand like heaven graced by those foremost of celestials, the highly fortunate Lokapalas. And seeing the abode of Kuvara and the Rakshasas, lying slain on the ground, the king addressed his brother who was seated, saying, either it be through rashness, or through ignorance, thou hast, O Bhima, committed a sinful act. O hero, as thou art leading the life of an anchorite, this slaughter without cause is unlike thee. Acts, it is asserted by those versed in duties, as are calculated to displease a monarch, ought not to be committed. But thou hast, O Bhimasena, committed a deed which will offend even the gods. He that disregarding profit and duty, turneth his thoughts to sin, must, O Partha, reap the fruit of his sinful actions. However, if thou seekest my good, never again commit such a deed. Vaisampayana continued, having said this to his brother, Vrikodara the virtuous, the highly energetic and firm-minded son of Kunti, Yudhishthira versed in the particulars of the science of profit, ceased, and began to reflect on that matter. On the other hand, the Rakshasas that had survived those slain by Bhima fled in a body towards the abode of Kuvara. And they of exceeding fleetness having speedily reached Vaisravana's abode, began to utter loud cries of distress, being afflicted with the fear of Bhima. And, O king, bereft of their weapons and exhausted and with their mail besmeared with gore and with dishevelled hair, they spake unto Kuvara, saying, O Lord, all thy foremost Rakshasas fighting with maces and clubs and swords and lances and barbed darts, have been slain. O Lord of treasures, a mortal, trespassing into the mountain, hath, single-handed, slaughtered all thy Krodovasa Rakshasas assembled together. And, O Lord of wealth, there lie the foremost of the Yakshas and Rakshasas senseless and dead, having been struck down, and we have been let off through his favor. And thy friend, Maniman also hath been slain. All this hath been done by a mortal. Do thou what is proper, after this. Having heard this, that lord of all the Yaksha hosts waxing wroth with eyes reddened in anger, exclaimed, What? And hearing of Bhima's second act of aggression, that lord of treasures, the king of the Yakshas, was filled with wrath, and said, Yoke the horses. Thereat, unto a car of the hue of dark clouds, and high as a mountain summit, they yoked steeds having golden garments. And on being yoked unto the car, those excellent horses of his, graced with every noble quality and furnished with the 10 auspicious curls of hair and having energy and strength, and adorned with various gems and looking splendid, as if desirous of speeding like the wind, began to neigh at each other the neighing emitted at the hour of victory. And that divine and effulgent king of the Yakshas set out, being eulogized by the celestials and Gandharvas. And 1,000 foremost yakshas of reddened eyes and golden luster and having huge bodies, and gifted with great strength, equipped with weapons and girding on their swords, followed that high-souled lord of treasures. And coursing through the firmament the steeds arrived at the Gandhamadana, as if drawing forward the sky with their fleetness. And with their down standing erect, the Pandavas saw that large assemblage of horses maintained by the Lord of Wealth and also the high-souled and graceful Kuvara himself surrounded by the Yaksha hosts. And seeing those mighty charioteers the son of Pandu, possessed of great strength, equipped with bows and swords, Kuvara also was delighted, and he was pleased at heart, keeping in view the task of the celestials. And like unto birds, they, the Yakshas, gifted with extreme celerity, alighted on the summit of the mountain and stood before the Pandavas, with the Lord of Treasures at their head. Then, O Bharata, seeing him pleased with the Pandavas, the Yakshas and the Gandharvas stood there, free from agitation. Then thinking themselves as having transgressed, those high-souled and mighty charioteers, the Pandavas, having bowed down unto that Lord, the giver of wealth, stood surrounding the Lord of Treasures with joined hands. And the Lord of Treasures sat on that excellent seat, the elegant Pushpaka, constructed by Viswakarma, painted with diverse colors. And thousands of Yakshas and Rakshasas, some having huge frames and some ears resembling pegs, and hundreds of Gandharvas and hosts of Apsaras sat in the presence of that one seated, even as the celestials sit surrounding him of 100 sacrifices and wearing a beautiful golden garland on his head and holding in his hands his noose and sword and bow. Bhima stood, gazing at the Lord of Wealth. And Bhimasena did not feel depressed either on having been wounded by the Rakshasas, or even in that plight seeing Kuvara arrive. And that one going about on the shoulders of men, on seeing Bhima stand desirous of fighting with sharpened shafts, said unto Dharma's son, O Partha, all the creatures know thee as engaged in their good. Do thou, therefore, with thy brothers fearlessly dwell on this summit of the mountain. And, O Pandava, be thou not angry with Bhima. These Yakshas and Rakshasas had already been slain by destiny, thy brother hath been the instrument merely. And it is not necessary to feel shame for the act of impudence that hath been committed. This destruction of the Rakshasas had been foreseen by the gods. I entertain no anger towards Bhimasena. Rather, O foremost of the Bharata race, I am pleased with him, nay, even before coming here, I had been gratified with this deed of Bhima. Vaisampayana said, having spoken thus unto the king, Kuvara, said unto Bhimasena, O child, O best of the Kurus, I do not mind this, O Bhima, as in order to please Krishna, thou hast, disregarding the gods and me also, committed this rash act, namely, the destruction of the Yakshas and the Rakshasas, depending on the strength of thy arms. I am well pleased with thee. O Vrikodara, today I have been freed from a terrible curse. For some offense, that great Rishi, Agastya, had cursed me in anger. Thou hast delivered me by this act of thine. O Pandu's son, my disgrace had ere this been fated. No offense, therefore, in any way, attaches unto thee, O Pandava. Yudhishthira said, O Divine One, why wast thou cursed by the high-souled Agastya? O God, I am curious to hear about the occasion of that imprecation. I wonder that at that very moment, thou together with thy forces and attendants wast not consumed by the ire of that intelligent one. Thereupon the Lord of Treasures said, At Kusastali, O King, once there was held a conclave of the gods. And surrounded by grum-visaged Yakshas, numbering 300 Mahapadmas, carrying various weapons, I was going to that place. And on the way, I saw that foremost of sages, Agastya, engaged in the practice of severe austerities on the bank of the Yamuna, abounding in various birds and graced with blossoming trees. And, O king, immediately on seeing that mass of energy, flaming and brilliant as fire, seated with upraised arms, facing the sun, my friend, the graceful lord of the Rakshasas, Maniman, from stupidity, foolishness, hauteur and ignorance discharged his excrement on the crown of that Maharshi. Thereupon, as if burning all the cardinal points by his wrath, he said unto me, Since, O Lord of treasures, in thy very presence, disregarding me, this thy friend hath thus affronted me, he, together with thy forces, shall meet with destruction at the hands of a mortal. And, O wicked-minded one, thou also, being distressed on account of thy fallen soldiers, shalt be freed from thy sin, on beholding that mortal. But if they follow thy behests, there the soldiers' powerful sons shall not incur by this dreadful curse. This curse I received formerly from that foremost of rishis. Now, O mighty king, have I been delivered by thy brother Bhima. Thus ends the 168th section in the Yakshayuddha Parva of the Vana Parva. Section 161, Yakshayuddha Parva. The Lord of Treasures said, O Yudhishthira, patience, ability, appropriate time and place and prowess, these five led to success in human affairs. O Bharata, in the Krita Yuga, men were patient and able in their respective occupations and they knew how to display prowess. And, O foremost of the Kshatriyas, a Kshatriya that is endued with patience and understandeth the propriety regarding place and time and is versed in all mortal regulations, can alone govern the world for a long time, nay, in all transactions. He that behoveth thus, acquireth, O hero, fame in this world and excellent state in the next. And by having displayed his prowess at the proper place and time, Sakra with the Vasu's hath obtained the dominion of heaven. He that from anger cannot see his fall, and he that being naturally wicked and evil-minded followeth evil, and he that knoweth not the propriety relative to acts, meet with destruction both in this world and the next. The exertions of that stupid person become fruitless, who is not conversant with the expediency regarding time and acts, and he meeteth with destruction both in this world and the next. And the object of that wicked and deceitful person is vicious, who, aiming at mastery of every kind, committeth some rash act. O best of men, Bhimasena is fearless, and ignorant of duties, and haughty, and of the sense of a child, and unforbearing. Do thou, therefore, check him, repairing again to the hermitage of the pious sage Ashtasena, do thou reside there during the dark fortnight, without fear or anxiety. O Lord of men, deputed by me, all the Gandharvas residing at Alaka, as also those dwelling in this mountain, will, O mighty armed one, protect thee, and these best of the Brahmanas. And, O king, O chief among virtuous men, knowing that Vrikodara hath come hither out of rashness, do thou check him. Henceforth, O monarch, beings living in the forest will meet you, wait upon you and always protect you all. And, ye foremost of men, my servants will always procure for you various meats and drinks of delicious flavor. And, O son, Yudhishthira, even as by reason of your being the progeny of spiritual intercourse, Jishnu is entitled to the protection of Mahendra, and Vrikodara, of the wind god, and thou, of Dharma, and the twins possessed of strength, of the Aswins, so ye all are entitled to my protection. That one next by birth to Bhimasena, Falguna, versed in the science of profit and all mortal regulations, is well in heaven. And, O child, those perfections that are recognized in the world as leading to heaven, are established in Dhananjaya even from his very birth. And self-restraint, and charity, and strength, and intelligence, and modesty, and fortitude, and excellent energy, even all these are established in that majestic one of magnificent soul. And, O Pandava, Jishnu never committed any shameful act through poverty of spirit. And in the world, none ever say that Partha hath uttered an untruth. And, O Bharata, honored by the gods, P3s, and the Gandharvas, that enhancer of the glory of the Kurus is learning the science of weapons in Sakra's abode. And, O Partha, in heaven he that with justice had brought under his subjection all the rulers of the earth, even that exceedingly powerful and highly energetic monarch, the grandsire of thy father, Santanu himself, is well pleased with the behavior of that wielder of the Gandhiva, the foremost of his race. And, O king, abiding in Indra's regions, he who on the banks of the Yamuna had worshipped the gods, the P3s, and the Brahmanas, by celebrating 7 grand horse sacrifices, that great grandsire of thine, the Emperor Santanu of severe austerities, who hath attained heaven, hath enquired of thy welfare. Vaisampayana said, having heard these words of the dispenser of wealth, the Pandavas were well pleased with them. Then lowering his club and make and sword and bow, that foremost of the Bharatas bore down unto Kuvara. And that giver of protection, the Lord of treasures, seeing him prostrate, said, Be thou the destroyer of the pride of foes, and the enhancer of the delight of friends. And ye oppressors of enemies, do ye live in our romantic region? The Yakshas will not cross your desires. Gudakesa, after having acquired mastery over weapons, will come back soon. Bidden adieu by Magavat himself, Dhananjaya will join you. Having thus instructed Yudhishthira of excellent deeds, the lord of the Guhayakas, vanished from that best of mountains. And thousands upon thousands of Yakshas, and Rakshasas followed him in vehicles spread over with checkered cushions, and decorated with various jewels. And as the horses proceeded towards the abode of Kuvara, a noise arose as of birds flying in the air. And the chargers of the Lord of Treasures speedily coursed through the sky as if drawing forward the firmament, and devouring the air. Then at the command of the Lord of Wealth, the dead bodies of the Rakshasas were removed from the summit of the mountain. As the intelligent Agastya had fixed this period as the limit of, the duration of, his curse, so being slain in conflict, the Rakshasas were freed from the imprecation. And being honored by the Rakshasas, the Pandavas for several nights dwelt pleasantly in those habitations. Thus ends the 161st section in the Yakshayuddha Parva of the Vana Parva. Section 162, Yakshayuddha Parva continued. Vaisampayana continued, Then, O repressor of foes, at sunrise, having finished his daily devotions, Domya came unto the Pandavas, with Ashtishena. And having bowed down unto the feet of Ashtishena and Domya, they with joined hands paid homage unto all the Brahmanas. Then Domya taking Yudhishthira's right hand, said these words, looking at the east, O mighty monarch, this king of mountains, Mandara, lieth vast, covering the earth up to the ocean. O Pandava, Indra and Vaisravana preside over this point graced with woods and forests and mountains. And, O child, the intelligent sages versed in every duty, say, that this region is the abode of Indra and King Vaisravana. And the twice-born ones, and the sages versed in the duties, and the Siddhas, and the Sadhyas, and the celestials pay their adorations unto the sun as he receded from this point. And that Lord of all living beings, King Yama, conversant with duty, presided over yonder southern region whither come the spirits of the departed. And this is Sanyamana, the abode of the Lord of departed spirits, sacred, and wonderful to behold, and crowned with prime prosperity. And the intelligent ones call that monarch of mountains by the name of Asta. Having, O king, arrived at this, the sun ever abideth by the truth. And King Varuna protects all creatures, abiding in this king of mountains, and also in the vast deep. And, O highly fortunate one, there illumining the northern regions, lieth the puissant Mahatmaru, auspicious and the refuge of those knowing Brahma, where is the court of Brahma, and remaining where that soul of all creatures, Prajapati, hath created all that is mobile and immobile. And the Mahameru is the auspicious and healthy abode even of the 7 mind-born sons of Brahma, of whom Daksha was the 7th. And, O child, here it is that the 7 celestial rishis with Vasishtha at their head rise and set. Behold that excellent and bright summit of the Meru, where sitteth the great sire, Brahma, with the celestials happy in self-knowledge. And next to the abode of Brahma is visible the region of him who is said to be the really primal cause or the origin of all creatures, even that prime Lord, God Narayana, having neither beginning nor end. And, O king, that auspicious place composed of all energies even the celestials cannot behold. And the region of the high-souled Vishnu, by its native splendor, exceeding in effulgence the sun or fire, cannot be beheld by the gods, or the Danavas. And the region of Narayana lieth resplendent to the east of the Meru, where, O child, that Lord of all creatures, the self-create primal cause of the universe, having manifested all beings, looketh splendid of his excellent grace. O child, not to speak of the Maharshis, even Brahmarshis have no access to that place. And, O best of the Kurus, it is the Yatis only who have access to it. And, O Pandu's son, at that place luminaries cannot shine by him, there that Lord of inconceivable soul alone shineth transcendental. There by reverence, and severe austerities, Yatis inspired by virtue of pious practices, attain Narayana Hari. And, O Bharata, repairing thither, and attaining that universal soul, the self-create and eternal God of gods, high-souled ones, of yoga success, and free from ignorance and pride have not to return to this world. O highly fortunate Yudhishthira, this region is without beginning, or deterioration, or end, for it is the very essence of that God. And, O son of the Kurus, the sun and the moon every day go round this Meru, coursing in an opposite direction. And, O sinless one, O mighty monarch, the other luminaries also go round this king of mountains in the self-same way. Thus the worshipful sun who dispelleth darkness, goeth round this mountain obscuring other luminaries. Then having set, and passed the evening, that maker of day, the sun, taketh a northerly course. Then again nearing the Meru, the divine sun ever intent on the good of all beings, again courseth, facing the east. And in this way, the divine moon also together with the stars goeth round this mountain, dividing the month unto several sections, by his arrival at the Parvas. Having thus unerringly coursed round the mighty Meru, and, nourished all creatures, the moon again repaireth unto the Manda. In the same way, that destroyer of darkness the divine sun also moveth on this unobstructed path, animating the universe. When, desirous of causing dew, he repaireth to the south, then there ensueth winter to all creatures. Then the sun, turning back from the south, by his rays draweth up the energy from all creatures both mobile and immobile. Thereupon, men become subject to perspiration, fatigue, drowsiness and lassitude, and living beings always feel disposed to slumber. Thence, returning through unknown regions, that divine effulgent one causeth shower, and thereby reviveth beings. And having, by the comfort caused by the shower, wind, and warmth, cherished the mobile and the immobile, the powerful sun resumeth his former course. O Partha, ranging thus, the sun unerringly turneth on the wheel of time, influencing created things. His course is unceasing, he never resteth, O Pandava. Withdrawing the energy of all beings, he again rendereth it back. O Bharata, dividing time into day and night, and Kala, and Kashta, that Lord, the sun, dealeth life and motion to all created things. Thus ends the 162nd section in the Yakshayuddha Parva of the Vana Parva. Section 163, Yakshayuddha Parva continued. Vaisampayana continued, dwelling in that best of mountains, those high-souled ones observing excellent vows, felt themselves attracted to that place, and diverted themselves, eager to behold Arjuna. And multitudes of Gandharvas and Maharshis gladly visited those energetic ones, possessing prowess, of chaste desires, and being the foremost of those endued with truth and fortitude. And having arrived at that excellent mountain furnished with trees bearing blossoms, those mighty charioteers were exceedingly delighted, even as the Mayutas, on arriving at the celestial regions. And experiencing great exhilaration, they lived there, seeing the slopes and summits of that mighty mountain, filled with flowers, and resonant with the cries of peacocks and cranes. And on that beautiful mountain they beheld lakes filled with lotuses, and having their shores covered with trees, and frequented by darkness, and karandavas and swans. And the flourishing sporting regions, graceful on account of the various flowers, and abounding in gems, was capable of captivating that king, the dispenser of wealth Kuvara. And always ranging there, those foremost of ascetics the Pandavas were incapable of conceiving the significance of that summit, furnished with mighty trees, and masses of wide-spreading clouds. And, O great hero, owing to its native splendor, and also on account of the brilliance of the annual plants, there was no difference there between night and day. And staying in the mountain, remaining in which the sun of unrivaled energy cherisheth the mobile and immobile things, those heroes and foremost of men beheld the rising and the setting of the sun. And having seen the rising and the setting points of the sun and the rising and the setting mountain, and all the cardinal points, as well as the intervening spaces, ever blazing with the rays of the dispeller of darkness, those heroes, in expectation of the arrival of that mighty charioteer firm in truth, became engaged in reciting the Veds, practicing the daily rituals, chiefly discharging the religious duties, exercising sacred vows, and abiding by the truth. And saying, "Let us even here experience delight by joining without delay Arjuna accomplished in arms." Those highly blessed Parthas became engaged in the practice of yoga. And beholding romantic woods on that mountain, as they always thought of Kiriti, every day and night appeared unto them even as a year. From that very moment joy had taken leave of them when, with Domya's permission, the high-souled Jishnu, matting his hair, departed for the woods. So, how could they, absorbed in his contemplation, experience happiness there? They had become overwhelmed with grief ever since the moment when at the command of his brother, Yudhishthira, Jishnu of the tread of a mad elephant had departed from the Kamyaka forest. O Bharata, in this way, on that mountain those descendants of Bharata passed a month with difficulty, thinking of him of the white steeds, who had gone to Vasava's abode for learning arms. And Arjuna, having dwelt for 5 years in the abode of him of 1,000 eyes, and having from that Lord of Celestials obtained all the celestial weapons, such as those of Agni, of Varuna, of Soma, of Vayu, of Vishnu, of Indra, of Pasupati, of Brahma, of Parameshti, of Prajapati, of Yama, of Datta, of Savita, of Twashta, and of Vaisravana, and having bowed down to and gone round him of 100 sacrifices, and taken his, Indra's, permission, cheerfully came to the Gandhamadana. Thus ends the 163rd section in the Yakshayuddha Parva of the Vana Parva. Section 164, Yakshayuddha Parva continued. Vaisampayana continued, and it came to pass that once a day as those mighty charioteers were thinking of Arjuna, seeing Mahendra's car, yoked with horses of the effulgence of lightning, arrive all on a sudden, they were delighted. And driven by Matali, that blazing car, suddenly illuminating the sky, looked like smokeless flaming tongues of fire, or a mighty meteor embosomed in clouds. And seated in that car, appeared Kiriti, wearing garlands and new-made ornaments. Then Dhananjaya, possessing the prowess of the wielder of the thunderbolt, alighted on that mountain, blazing in beauty. And that intelligent one, decked in a diadem and garlands, having alighted on the mountain, first bowed down at the feet of Dhaumya, and then at those of Ajatasatru. And he also paid homage unto Vrikodara's feet, and the twins also bowed down unto him. Then going to Krishna, and having cheered her, he stood before his elder brother in humble guise. And on meeting with that matchless one, they were exceedingly delighted. And he also meeting with them rejoiced exceedingly, and began to eulogize the king. And seeing before them that car driving in which the slayer of Namuchi had annihilated 7 phalanxes of Diti's offspring, the magnanimous Patas went round it. And being highly pleased, they offered excellent worship unto Matali, as unto the Lord of the Celestials himself. And then the son of the Kuru king duly inquired of him after the health of all the gods. And Matali also greeted them. And having instructed the Patas even as a father taught his sons, he ascended that incomparable car, and returned to the Lord of the Celestials. And when Matali had gone away, that foremost of the royal race, Sakra's son, the high-souled destroyer of all foes, made over unto his love, the mother of Sutasoma, beautiful precious gems and ornaments having the splendor of the sun, which had been presented to him by Sakra. Then, sitting in the midst of those foremost of the Kurus, and those best of the Brahmanas, effulgent like unto fire or the sun, he began to relate all as it had happened, saying, in this way, I have learnt weapons from Sakra, Vayu, and the manifest Siva, and all the celestials with Indra also have been pleased with me, on account of my good behavior, and concentration. After having briefly narrated unto them his sojourn in heaven, Kiriti of spotless deeds agreeably slept that night with the 2 sons of Madri. Thus ends the 164th in the Yakshayuddha Parva of the Vana Parva. Section 165, Nivataka Vachayuddha Parva continued. Vaisampayana said, then when the night had been spent, Dhananjaya, together with his brothers, paid homage unto Yudhishthira the just. And, O Bharata, at this moment, proceeding from the celestials there arose mighty and tremendous sounds of all musical instruments, and the rattling of car wheels, and the tolling of bells. And thereat all the beasts and beasts of prey and birds emitted separate cries. And from all sides in cars resplendent as the sun, hosts of Gandharvas and Apsaras began to follow that represser of foes, the Lord of the Celestials. And ascending a car yoked with steeds, decorated with burnished gold, and roaring like clouds, that King of the Celestials, Purandara blazing in beauty, came unto the Patas. And having arrived at that place, he of 1,000 eyes descended from his car. And as soon as Yudhishthira the just saw that high-souled one, he together with his brothers, approached that graceful king of the immortals. And in accordance with the ordinance that generous one duly worshipped him of immeasurable soul, in consequence with his dignity. And then Dhananjaya, possessed of prowess, having bowed down unto Purandara, stood before the Lord of the Celestials in humble guise, like unto a servant. And seeing the sinless Dhananjaya having ascetic merit, bearing clotted hair, stand in humility before the Lord of Celestials, Yudhishthira, the son of Kunti, of great energy, smelt the crown of his head. And beholding Falguna in that attitude, he was exceedingly glad, and by worshipping the King of the Celestials, he experienced the highest bliss. Then unto that strong-minded monarch, swimming in felicity, the intelligent Lord of the Celestials, Purandara, spake, saying, Thou shalt rule the earth, O Pandava. Blessed be thou. Do thou, O Kunti's son, again repair unto Kamyaka. That learned man who for a year leading the brahmacharya mode of life, subduing his senses and observing vows, peruse with rapt attention this meeting of Sakra with the Pandavas, live it 100 years free from disturbances, and enjoying happiness. Thus ends the 165th section in the Nivatakavachayuddha Parva of the Vana Parva. Section 166, Nivatakavachayuddha Parva continued. Vaisampayana continued, when Sakra had gone to his proper place, Vibhatsu together with his brothers and Krishna, paid homage unto the son of Dharma. Then smelling the crown of the head of that Pandava, who was thus paying homage, Yudhishthira in accents faltering on account of joy, addressed Arjuna, saying, O Arjuna, how didst thou pass this period in heaven? And how hast thou obtained the weapons, and how also hast thou gratified the Lord of the Celestials? And, O Pandava, hast thou adequately secured the weapons? Have the Lord of the Celestials and Rudra gladly granted thee the weapons? And how hast thou beheld the divine Sakra, and the wielder of Pinaka? And how hast thou obtained the weapons? And in what manner didst thou worship them? And what service hadst thou done unto that represser of foes, the worshipful one of 100 sacrifices, that he said unto thee, by thee have I been gratified? All this, O highly effulgent one, I wish to hear in detail. And, O sinless one, the manner in which thou didst please Mahadeva and the king of the celestials and, O represser of foes, the service thou hadst done to the wielder of the thunderbolt, do thou, O Dhananjaya, relate all this in detail. Arjuna said, O mighty monarch, listen how I duly beheld him of 100 sacrifice and the divine Sankara also. O grinder of foes, king, having acquired that science which thou hadst directed me to learn, I at thy command went to the forest, for practicing penances. From Kamyaka repairing to the Brigutunga, I spent there one night, being engaged in austerities. And it came to pass that on the next day I saw a certain Brahmana. And he asked me, saying, O son of Kunti, whither wilt thou go? Thereupon, O descendant of the Kurus, I truly related unto him everything. And, O best of kings, having heard the true account, the Brahmana became well pleased with me, and, O king, praised me. Then the Brahmana, pleased with me, said, O Bharata, be thou engaged in austerities. By performing penances, thou wilt in a short time behold the Lord of the Celestials. And according to his advice I ascended the Himavan, and, O mighty king, began to practice penances, the first month subsisting on fruit and roots. I spent the second month, subsisting on water. And, O Pandava, in the third month I totally abstained from food. And in the fourth month I remained with upraised arms. And a wonder it is that I did not lose any strength. And it came to pass that when the first day of the fifth month had been spent, there appeared before me a being wearing the form of a boar, turning up the earth with his mouth, stamping the ground with his feet, rubbing the earth with his breast, and momentarily going about in a frightful manner. And him followed a great being in the guise of a hunter furnished with the bow, arrows, and the sword, and surrounded by females. Thereupon, taking my bow and the two inexhaustible quivers, I pierced with shafts that terrible and frightful creature. And simultaneously with me that hunter also drawing a strong bow, more severely struck at the animal, as if shaking my mind. And, O king, he also said unto me, Why hast thou, transgressing the rules of hunting, hit the animal first hit at by me? With these sharpened shafts will I destroy thy pride. Stay. Then that mighty-bodied one holding the bow rushed at me. And with volleys of mighty shafts, he covered me entirely, even as a cloud covereth a mountain with showers. Then, on my part, I covered him with a mighty discharge of arrows. Thereupon, with steady arrows having their points aflame, and inspired with mantras, I pierced him even as Sindra rivet a mountain with a thunderbolt. Then his person began to be multiplied 100-fold and 1,000-fold. At this, I pierced all his bodies with shafts. Then again all those forms became one, O Bharata. Thereat I struck at it. Next, he now assumed a small body with a huge head, and now a huge body with a small head. And, O king, he then assumed his former person, and approached me for fight. And, O foremost of the Bharata race, when in the encounter I failed to overwhelm him with arrows, I fixed the mighty weapon of the wind god. But I failed to discharge it at him, and this was a wonder. And when that weapon thus failed of effect, I was struck with amazement. However, O king, exerting myself more vigorously, I again covered that being with a mighty multitude of shafts. Then taking Stunakarna, and Varuna, and Salava, and Asmavasha weapons, I assailed him, profusely showering shafts. But, O king, he instantly swallowed up even all these weapons of mine. And when all those weapons had been swallowed up, I discharged the weapon presided over by Brahma. And when the blazing arrows issuing from that weapon were heaped upon him all around, and being thus heaped over by that mighty weapon discharged by me, he increased in bulk. Then all the world became oppressed with the energy begotten of the weapon hurled by me, and the firmament and all the points of the sky became illumined. But that one of mighty energy instantly baffled even that weapon. And, O monarch, when that weapon presided over by Brahma had been baffled, I was possessed with terrible fear. Thereupon immediately holding even my bow and the two inexhaustible quivers, I shot at that being, but he swallowed up all those weapons. And when all the weapons had been baffled and swallowed up, there ensued a wrestling between him and myself. And we encountered each other first with blows and then with slaps. But incapable of overcoming that being, I fell down stupefied on the ground. Thereupon, O mighty king, with a laugh, that wonderful being at my sight vanished at that spot together with the woman. Having accomplished this, O illustrious monarch, that divine one assumed another and unearthly form clad in wonderful raiment. And renouncing the form of a hunter, that divine lord of the gods, resumed his own unearthly appearance, and that mighty god stood there. Then appeared before me with Uma, that manifest divine one, having the bull for his mark, wielding the pinaka, bearing serpents and capable of assuming many forms. And, O repressor of foes, advancing towards me, standing even then in the field ready for conflict, that wielder of the trident addressed me saying, I am well pleased with thee. Then that divine one held up my bows and the couple of quivers furnished with inexhaustible shafts, and returned them unto me saying, Do thou ask some boon, O Kunti's son. I am well pleased with thee. Tell me, what I shall do for thee. And, O hero, express the desire that dwelleth in thy heart. I will grant it. Except immortality alone, tell me as to the desire that is in thy heart. Thereat, with my mind intent on the acquisition of arms, I only bowed down unto Siva and said, O divine one, if thou beest favorably disposed towards me, then I wish to have this boon, I wish to learn all the weapons that are with thy godhead. Then the god Trimbaka said unto me, I will give. O Pandava, my own weapon Rodra shall attend upon thee. Thereupon Mahadeva, well pleased, granted to me the mighty weapon, Pasupata. And, having granted that eternal weapon, he also said unto me, This must never be hurled at mortals. If discharged at any person of small energy, it would consume the universe. Shouldst thou at any time be hard pressed, thou mayst discharge it. And when all thy weapons have been completely baffled, thou mayst hurl it. Then when he, having the bull for his mark, had been thus gratified, there stood manifest by my side that celestial weapon, of resistless force capable of baffling all weapons and destructive of force and the hero of hostile forces and unrivaled and difficult to be borne even by the celestials, the demons and the Rakshasas. Then at the command of that god, I Saturday me down there. And in my very sight the god vanished from the spot. Thus ends the 166th section in the Nivataka Vachayuddha Parva of the Vana Parva. Section 167, Nivataka Vachayuddha Parva continued. Arjuna said, O Bharata, by the grace of that god of gods the Supreme Soul, Trimbaka, I passed the night at that place. And having passed the night, when I had finished the morning rituals, I saw that foremost of the Brahmanas whom I had seen before. And unto him I told all as it had happened, O Bharata, namely, that I had met the divine Mahadeva. Thereupon, O King of Kings, well pleased, he said unto me, since thou hast beheld the great God, incapable of being beheld by any one else, soon wilt thou mix with Vivasvata and the other Lokapalas and the Lord of the Celestials, and Indra too will grant thee weapons. O King, having said this unto me and having embraced me again and again, that Brahmana resembling the sun, went away whither he listed. And, O slayer of foes, it came to pass that on the evening of that day refreshing the whole world, there began to blow a pure breeze. And in my vicinity on the base of the Himalaya mountain fresh, fragrant and fair flowers began to bloom. And on all sides there were heard charming symphony and captivating hymns relating to Indra. And before the Lord of the celestial hosts of Apsaras and Gandharvas chanted various songs. And ascending celestial cars, there approached the Mayutas and the followers of Mahendra and the dwellers of heaven. And afterwards, Marutvan together with Sachi and all the celestials appeared on the scene in cars yoked with horses elegantly adorned. And at this very moment, O King, he that goeth about on the shoulders of men manifested himself unto me in excellent grace. And I saw Yama seated on the south and Varuna and the Lord of the Celestials at their respective regions. And, O foremost of men, O mighty monarch, they after having cheered me said, O Savyaschin, behold us the Lokapalas seated. For the performance of the task of the gods thou hast obtained the sight of Sankara. Do thou now receive weapons from us seated around. Thereupon, O Lord, having bowed down unto those foremost of the celestials with regard, I duly accepted those mighty weapons. And then they recognized me as one of their own. Afterwards the gods repaired to the quarter from whence they had come. And that Lord of the Celestials, the divine Maghavan too having ascended his glorious chariot, said, O Falguna, thou shalt have to repair unto the celestial region. O Dhananjaya, even before this thy arrival I knew that thou wouldst come hither. Then have I, O best of the Bharatas, manifested myself unto thee. As formerly thou hadst performed thy ablution in the various tirthas and now hast performed severe austerities, so thou wilt be able to repair unto the celestial regions, O Pandava. Thou wilt, however, again have to practice extreme penance, for thou shouldst at any rate journey to heaven. And at my command, Mateti shall take thee to the celestial regions. Thou hast already been recognized by the celestials and the celestial sages of high soul. Thereupon I said unto Sakra, O Divine One, be thou favorable unto me. With the view of learning arms do I beseech thee that thou mayst be my preceptor. At this Indra said, O child, having learnt weapons thou wouldst perform terrible deeds and with this object thou desirest to obtain the weapons. However, obtain thou the arms, as thou desirest. Then I said, O slayer of foes, I never would discharge these celestial weapons at mortals except when all my other arms should have been baffled. Do thou, O Lord of the Celestials, grant me the celestial weapons so that I may hereafter obtain the regions attainable by warriors. Indra said, O Dhananjaya, it is to try thee that I have said such words unto thee. Having been begotten of me, this speech of thine will becometh thee. Do thou, O Bharata, repairing unto my abode learn all the weapons of Vayu, of Agni, of the Vasus, of Varuna, of the Mayutas, of the Siddhas, of Brahma, of the Gandharvas, of the Uragas, of the Rakshasas, of Vishnu and of the Nairitas, and also all the weapons that are with me, O perpetuator of the Kuru race. Having said this unto me, Sakra vanished at the very spot. Then, O king, saw I the wonderful and sacred celestial car yoked with steeds arrive conducted by Matali. And when the Lokapalas went away, Matali said unto me, O thou of mighty splendor, the Lord of the celestials is desirous of seeing thee. And O mighty armed one, do thou acquire competence and then perform thy task. Come and behold the regions, attainable by merit, and come unto heaven even in this frame. O Bharata, the thousand-eyed Lord of the celestials wisheth to see thee. Thus addressed by Matali, I, taking leave of the mountain Himalaya and having gone round it, ascended that excellent car. And then the exceedingly generous Matali, versed in equine lore, drove the steeds, gifted with the speed of thought or the wind. And when the chariot began to move, that charioteer, looking at my face as I was seated steadily, wondered and said these words, Today this appeareth unto me strange and unprecedented, that being seated in this celestial car, thou hast not been jerked ever so little. O foremost of Bharata race, I have ever remarked that at the first pull by the steeds even the Lord of the celestials himself getteth jerked. But all the while that the car had moved, thou hast been sitting unshaken. This appeareth unto me as transcending even the power of Sakra. Having said this, O Bharata, Matali soared in the sky and showed me the abodes of the celestials and their palaces. Then the chariot yoked with steeds coursed upwards. And the celestials and the sages began to worship that car, O prime of men. And I saw the regions, moving anywhere at will, and the splendor also of the highly energetic Gandharvas, Apsaras, and the celestial sages. And Sakra's charioteer, Matali, at once showed me Nandana and other gardens and groves belonging to the celestials. Next I beheld Indra's abode, Amravati, adorned with jewels and trees yielding any sort of fruit that is desired. There the sun doth not shed heat, nor doth heat or cold or fatigue there affect one, O king. And, O great monarch, the celestials feel neither sorrow nor poverty of spirit, nor weakness, nor lassitude, O grinder of force. And, O ruler of men, the celestials and the others have neither anger nor covetousness. And, O king, in the abodes of the celestials, the beings are ever contented. And there the trees ever bear verdant foliage, and fruits, and flowers, and the various lakes are embalmed with the fragrance of lotuses. And there the breeze is cool, and delicious, and fragrant, and pure, and inspiriting. And the ground is variegated with all kinds of gems, and adorned with blossoms. And there were seen innumerable beautiful beasts, and in the air innumerable ranges of the sky. Then I saw the Vasus, and the Rudras, and the Sadhyas with the Mayutas, and the Adityas, and the two Aswins, and worshipped them. And they conferred their benison on me, granting me strength and prowess, and energy, and celebrity, and skill in arms, and victory in battle. Then, entering that romantic city adored by the Gandharvas and the celestials, with joined hands, I stood before the thousand-eyed Lord of the celestials. Thereupon, that best of bestowers gladly offered unto me half of his seat, and Vasava also with regard touched my person. And, O Bharata, with the view of acquiring arms and learning weapons, I began to dwell in heaven, together with the gods and the Gandharvas of generous souls. And Viswavana's son, Chitrasena, became my friend. And he, O king, imparted unto me the entire Gandharva science. And, O monarch, I happily lived in Sakra's abode, well cared for, having all my desires gratified, learning weapons, listening to the notes of songs, and the clear sounds of musical instruments, and beholding the foremost of Apsaras dance. And without neglecting to study the arts, which I learned properly, my attention was specially fixed on the acquisition of arms. And that Lord of 1,000 eyes was pleased with that purpose of mine. Living thus in heaven, O king, I passed this period. And when I had acquired proficiency in weapons, and gained his confidence, that one having for his vehicle the horse Uchchaisrava, Indra, patting me on the head with his hand, said these words, Now even the celestials themselves cannot conquer thee, what shall I say of imperfect mortals residing on earth? Thou hast become invulnerable in strength, irrepressible, and incomparable in fight. Then with the hair of his body standing on end, he again accosted me, saying, O hero, in fighting with weapons none is equal unto thee. And, O perpetuator of the Kuru race, thou art even watchful, and dexterous, and truthful, and of subdued senses, and the protector of the Brahmanas, and adept in weapons, and warlike. And, O Partha, together with the knowledge of the 5 modes, using them, thou hast obtained 5 and 10 weapons, and, therefore, there existeth none who is thy peer. And thou perfectly learned the discharge of those weapons, and their withdrawal, and their redischarge and re-withdrawal, and the prayashita connected with them, and also their revival, in case of their being baffled. Now, O repressor of force, the time hath arrived for thy paying the preceptor's fee. Do thou promise to pay the fee, then I shall unfold unto thee what thou wilt have to perform. Thereat, O king, I said unto the ruler of the celestials, If it be in my power to do the work, do thou consider it as already accomplished by me. O king, when I had said these words, Indra with a smile said unto me, Nothing is there the 3 worlds that is not in thy power to achieve. My enemies, those Danavas, named Nivatakavachas, dwell in the womb of the ocean. And they number 30 million and are notorious, and all of equal forms and strength and splendor. Do thou slay them there, O Kunti's son, and that will be thy preceptor's fee. Saying this, he gave unto me the highly resplendent celestial car, conducted by Matali, furnished with hair resembling the down of peacocks. And on my head he set this excellent diadem, and he gave ornaments for my body, like unto his own. And he granted unto me the impenetrable mail, the best of its kind, and easy to the touch, and fastened unto the Gandiva this durable string. Then I set out, ascending that splendid chariot, riding on which in days of yore, the Lord of the Celestials had vanquished Vali, that son of Virochana. And, O ruler of men, startled by the rattling of the car, all the Celestials approached there, taking me to be the king of the Celestials. And seeing me, they asked, O Falguna, what art thou going to do? And I told them as it had fallen out, and said, I shall even do this in battle. Ye that are highly fortunate, know that I have set out desirous of slaying the Nivatakavachas. O sinless ones, do ye bless me. Thereupon, they began to eulogize me even as they eulogized the god, Purandara. And they said, riding on this car, Magavan conquered in battle Samvara, and Namuchi, and Vala, and Vritra, and Prahrada, and Naraka. And mounted on this car also Magavan, had conquered in battle many thousands and millions and hundreds of millions of Daityas. And, O Kaunteya, thou also, riding on this car, by thy prowess shalt conquer the Nivatakavachas in conflict, even as did the self-possessed Magavan in days of yore. And here is the best of shells, by this also thou shalt defeat the Danavas. And by this it is that the high-souled Sakra conquered the worlds. Saying this, the gods offered unto me this shell, Devadatta, sprung in the deep, and I accepted it for the sake of victory. And at this moment, the gods fell extolling me. And in order to be engaged in action, I proceeded to the dreadful abode of the Danavas, furnished with the shell, the mail, and arrows, and taking my bow. Thus ends the 167th section in the Nivatakavachayuddha Parva of the Vana Parva. If you enjoyed this audiobook, please like and subscribe to be notified of when new audiobooks are uploaded. Thank you for listening and learning. Shanti.